We good? Live? Yes, we are. Okay, hey everyone, what's up? You are listening to or watching the My Comic Book Journey podcast. I'm your host, KNDY. This podcast is pretty much me connecting back to my old comic book roots and reading a lot of the comic books that I purchased during the past or still have and been on the backlog. But I will tell you, a lot of the comic books I read back then as a kid, only if it was truly special I could remember them, but a lot of them I don't. So I'm reading them a lot right now and just reconnecting, and also, just reading certain collections that I've amassed. And for those of you who are wondering what kind of collector I am, I'm not a person that does the CGC thing. I pretty much buy comic books to read, and the kind of collector that I am is that I'm a completionist. Is the worst type of collector. I don't want to say it's the worst type of collector, but it's the worst thing to get into because it becomes more expensive because you always want to have everything of that comic book run. And it's even worse if you are into the older stuff like the 60s. Let's say if you will like Fantastic Four, Amazing Spider-Man and everything, then you start wanting to search out for the older stuff. I don't want to say it's the worst thing, because the thing is that there's other worse things out there, but I'm talking about more of the fiscal monetary side of things. It can get quite expensive, and a lot of people are like, damn man, I just want the issues that matter, those that are worth a lot. But for me, I read them. I read my comic books. I like to hold them. I like to smell them. I like to, not smell them, but you know that you're reading a comic book. You can automatically smell the paper and the ink and so forth. But for the most part, yeah, I like reading them from next issue on and not have any holes in my collection. So that's the kind of collector I am. And again, I probably maybe use the word worst type of collector, because again, there's other people who are worse. Some people look at scalpers as the worst, and so be it. For me, it's just more of when you're a completionist, I use the word worst in terms of you want to pretty much buy every single issue within that volume. And again, it gets a little cost. It becomes pricey. Okay, so what issue am I going to talk about today? Well, today I'm talking about DC's Arak, Son of Thunder. So this one was released back in November 1981. DC Comics, created by Roy Thomas and Ernie Collin. Written by Roy Thomas, penciler Ernie Collin, embellisher Tony Dezuniga, letterer John Costanza, colorist Adrienne Roy, editor Dick Giordano. So one thing you'll notice in the comic books that I feature, many feature the written work of Roy Thomas. Stan Lee hired Roy Thomas at Marvel, and Roy would be hired as editor-in-chief of Marvel, succeeding Stan Lee. And both men are legends in their own right in the comic book industry. And as many of us have grown up reading Roy Thomas stories, may it be classic The Avengers, X-Men, Captain Marvel, and worked on many A-list titles, he would also be known for writing the Conan the Barbarian, introducing sword and sorcery to comic books, and the Star Wars adaptation. In the 80s, Roy Thomas would return to DC Comics, where he worked before Marvel, for a few weeks, but this time for a longer run, working on titles such as The Legion of Superheroes, Green Lantern, Captain Carrot and His Amazing Zoo Crew, and All-Star Squadron. Roy Thomas would continue to have a great career at DC Comics and Marvel Comics for many years to come. But there is one title from his work in the 80s that tends to often be overseen. And understandably, it doesn't have the same cool factor when compared to superhero comics, but for comic book readers who love a well-written series with great artwork, Arak, Son of Thunder, and its earlier run was no doubt one of the best comic book series out there, that unfortunately many dismissed as Roy Thomas attempting to bring a Conan-style comic book series to DC Comics. I can understand the comparisons. Muscular guy, dark long hair, sword and sorcery storyline. But when you read the stories, they were much different. where Smith integrated mythological creatures, legendary characters, and figures from the Greek, Norse, Judeo-Christian, Muslim, etc. If anything, with the thoughts of exploration of those looking for new land, what if the roles were reversed, where a Native American ended up in a new land, living among people different than him? So I guess you could say, if you are an anime follower, think of the word isekai, alternative world. Someone from one world wakes up in another world. Arak's first appearance was an insert for the August 1981 issue of The Warlord, issue 48. For those not familiar with Arak, Son of Thunder, the story revolves around a Native American man who was found by Vikings drifting in the ocean alone. Never having seen a human with skin so red, some thought of him as a demon. But one man protected the young Indian Native American, who appeared to have great fighting abilities. As the Vikings talked about his friend who died, Arak, as a Native American tried to say the name, he says Arak. And so his Viking guardian would call the young man Arak, or Arak. And Arak would be raised among the Norsemen. In issue 3, Arak and Malagigi, the court wizard of Carolus Magnus, come across a group of thieves who demand their money or their lives. Arak and Malagigi are not going to give up anything without a fight, and as one can expect, both men defeat the group of thieves easily. But their swordsman, a man named Pero, who is maimed by Arak, asks for one thing: to die in honor in his home, not in the field. Malagigi is against it, but Arak, respected the fight in battle with Pero, decides to abide to his wishes. Meanwhile, Malagigi schools Arak on the 4 pillars of power and the various sorcerer abilities. As Arak carries the man back home and Malagigi follows, they are shocked that Pero would lose, but also bring a man with red skin to their home. And once they arrive, they bring Pero home, but they learn that the king sends a knight in dark armor to take from the people of the village. And sure enough, the knight arrives when Arak and Malagigi are still in the village. So this issue is important as it introduces readers to Valda, daughter of Bradamante, a fictional knight heroine in 2 poems of the Renaissance, Orlando Innamorato, by Matteo Maria Biardo, and Orlando Furioso by Ludovico Ariosto, better known as Valda the Iron Maiden. The opposite of Marvel Comics' Red Sonja, Valda is a warrior wearing a full male shirt. So that's something to know about the series. And Arak and Valda would appear in DC Comics years later. But my feeling of Arak, Son of Thunder, is that it's one of the few comic book series which not only was it well written, but also managed to incorporate mythology from various cultures and integrate it into a storyline. But it was also the first Native American hero that would have his own comic book for numerous years. Roy Thomas did a magnificent job with this issue, as did artist Ernie Cullen and his crew. But it's a shame that because this is not a superhero comic book, nor is there guarantee that it would lead to positive sales if released as an omnibus, that very few will discover this comic book series. Seriously, if you want to read a well-written comic book with intriguing characters, then definitely give Arak, Son of Thunder a try. I definitely recommend it. Okay, everyone, you take care. Wink, wink, and see you later, everyone. Bye-bye.